Meantime, in Europe, another big question out there is who the next Prime Minister of Britain will be. Conservative leader David Cameron is calling on British voters to end 13 years of Labour Party government as Britain faces huge economic challenges. For the markets, the key issue is tackling a deficit estimated at about 11% of GDP this year. Wolfango Piccoli is an analyst at Eurasia Group, which specializes in political risk research and makes sense of what it all means for business decisions. He joins us now live from London. So, we're down to the wire here. Who emerges as the next Prime Minister at this point? Is it David Cameron?
It looks like it's going to be David Cameron. What is unclear at this stage whether it's going to be David Cameron with a clear majority, an absolute majority in the House of Commons, or a David Cameron in a minority government. That is a big question mark now ahead of the election tomorrow.
Well, it looked like, because of what you're saying, that there was at least a clear front runner, that the pound regained some of the territory that it had lost. But given that we still have the level of uncertainty as to what the makeup of Parliament is going to look like, and then concerns elsewhere in Europe, how is that optimism still holding at this point?
Well, the market somewhat has changed its view. A couple of months ago was very concerned about the possibility we will end up in the so-called hung parliament, where no party has got a clear mandate. The markets realize that that scenario is not as bad as it looks at superficially, and therefore they moved on. And on the other way around, if you look at the three main political parties, they all agree that there is a need to do some significant cuts. And hung parliament itself is not a major obstacle to make these cuts happening.
So what has changed? I mean, I imagine if this heightened crisis in Greece that we're seeing, the kind of protests we're seeing today, if that had happened earlier in the election process, that perhaps debt and deficits would be even more front and center in terms of political language in the UK than they are now. What kind of resolution, what kind of programs can we expect if there is a Cameron government in terms of addressing some of those deficit issues?
Well, Margaret, first of all, let me say that the whole debate, the whole deficit issue was not debated at all during the months-long political campaign. It was a big missing item in the election campaign, and none of the parties gave really a clear-cut ideas of what they want to do in terms of reining in the deficit. In terms of Cameron here, it depends very much which kind of majority he's going to have to support him. His room for maneuver could be limited, more limited if he ends up and needing the support of the Lib Dem. But again, if you look at the proposal from both sides there, so far what we have seen is mainly the idea of raising some minor tax raises, but mainly cutting. The problem is that the cutting proposed are mainly efficiency cuts, which, as you know, are very difficult to measure. So all in all, we don't have a clear-cut picture of whatever these parties they want to do so far. What it needs to next is going to be what is somewhat differentiates the various position here is between the composition between cuts and tax increases.
So what is, I mean, if you can speculate or project for me what the UK's relationship with the rest of Europe is going to look like? I mean, you have all sorts of crazy speculation about people leaving the EU, countries leaving the EU at this point. That doesn't look to be anything more than a rumor at that point. But give me a sense of the UK's place in the rest of the region.
Well, I think the UK is a very different position from many of the southeastern European countries that now they are in the radar screen of investors. First of all, there is the credibility issue here. The credibility is not a problem for the UK. The books, in other words, have not been cooked here. Second, current account deficit in this country is relatively small, 1.7% of GDP. Third, exchange rate is flexible. They can print money, they can play around with exchange rate. Fourth, the maturity of the debt here is very long, on average 14 years. Very different situation from the case of Portugal, Greece, Spain and Italy itself.
All right, thanks for your perspective. Thank you so much. Wolfango Piccoli, analyst at Eurasia Group in London, telling us what to expect, perhaps even overnight, with the UK election.